Good evening and welcome to a new show of In-Depth. I'm Rick Morelli. On tonight's show, we're going to talk about an interesting topic that's going on here in the Hazleton Area School District, but also throughout the state and actually nationally, and that is a lot of parents are opting their children to not take the PSSA tests. This is a controversial issue and it's something that's been going on for a long time. Here with me tonight to talk about this, a good friend of mine who everyone knows, State Representative Tarah Toohil, and next to me, someone who is an advocate for this to take place and also has her master's in education, my good friend Renee Baran. Ladies, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, thank you.
You know, this is a topic that really has been going on for years, going back to No Child Left Behind, and it really comes down to teaching to the test rather than teaching to the students, if I'm not mistaken. And so what's happening now is that it's really starting to catch up out there where you have a lot of parents, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of parents want their kids to not take these tests. It's not fair, and the money could be allocated differently to the schools. So Renee, you've been advocating here and feel obviously pretty strongly against this. I'll throw it to you. Tell me a little bit, and everyone, what's going on.
I do. I've opted my son out this year. This is the first year that he would have taken them, and I opted him out. I feel very strongly about it. I would like to see control of education taken away from the government and put back into our local school districts and our school boards. I listen very closely to my teacher friends and my administrator friends, and I know how they feel about it. And I think it takes a movement on the grassroots level for the parents to start stepping up and saying, we want more control over the education that our children are receiving.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as I said before, there's a lot of time that's going on in the classroom of how to take a test versus just educating their kids. And is that what you're seeing from a lot of parents? And they're starting to say, time out, my kids aren't getting the education they need because of this?
Sure. And I mean, the teachers are under tremendous pressure because they're at risk professionally if the students aren't performing well on the tests. So, but PSSAs are only one of the standardized tests that students are taking annually. It takes up a huge percentage of classroom time to teach.
So explain the difference between the PSSAs and the SATs.
Vastly different. If you go online and you look, you just Google, sample questions for PSSAs, and you compare those to SAT questions, they are structured completely differently. And so it's a complete myth that this is a great precursor or practice for SATs. We're talking about the difference between testing an 8-year-old on a bubble test for 2.5 hours versus an 18-year-old who's stepping into the SATs.
So the PSSAs start early in school versus the SATs we've always taken when you're in high school, right?
PSSAs start in 3rd grade.
In 3rd grade,
yes.
And they go every 2 years, is that right? Or 3 years?
They can do testing from 3rd grade to 8th grade.
Okay.
So it depends. But that, I think, is one of the common myths that Renee just hit the nail on the head with that, where parents say, well, all the other kids are taking this test. I don't want Johnny to not have this testing experience because obviously testing is so important. How is he going to take the SATs and be able to get into a good college? So I have to have my kid test constantly. So parents are afraid to opt out because they think, well, all this time, all the other kids are going to be practicing taking this test. You got to get your practice in. And Renee cleared that up when I brought that to her. I said, well, parents are afraid because they want their kids to do the same thing, and you want your kid to have the same experiences as the other children and get ready for the SATs. And Renee was like, that's
it's a myth. It's a myth.
Yeah.
The questions are structured differently. The age appropriateness of the test is completely different. It's a myth.
So when you're saying opt out, and I'm just wondering, can a parent just do this? How can it happen? I mean, or can the school district or some officials take anything away from your kids? What goes on if this happens?
There is a process to opting out. It's fairly simple. You can look it up online. You contact the school, you sign a letter that explains why you're opting your child out. And your kids then spend time, in the library for the testing period. So for a number of days, they have no homework, which they think is fabulous. They have no homework, and they spend some time in the library, either working on the computer or free time reading or whatever.
So how many people are doing this? Is this something that a lot are starting to catch on? Is it just a handful of people?
There are in other states like New York and Connecticut, some of those high-profile states, the opt-out rates are huge. Like a 75% rate in New York this year. Big numbers, and boycotts and protests and parents standing outside, the schools. It's a very, very big issue because people, I think, are much more aware and better informed. We're trying to get the information out so that some people in our school district maybe can become more aware of how pressing the issue is.
Right.
And parents are communicating, which is great on Facebook. There's groups, so parents are giving each other information, trading the letter, the opt-out letter, so they can get that to the school. But I know that school district officials, they usually try to deter you from opting out. So they might say, hey, listen, we need your kid to take the test. That's been in my personal experience, that they really try to get you to take the test and still go through with it because they don't want to lose those numbers.
Yeah, so I'm curious as to what's the feedback from the officials, from the superintendent or the principals on this. Do you get a lot of pushback? Are they trying to encourage you to do this, to stay in it? I mean, what do you hear from them? What are they saying? Well,
they need a certain participation rate, but I think overwhelmingly, if you really start looking at the issue, there needs to be parental pushback.
Yeah. The model's not working. So the model that we're all having to operate under is not working because teachers, they are able, they go to school, they have a degree, they're passionate about what they do. Yep. And I think it just, year after year, especially if you're in those grades, 3rd grade through 8th grade, trying to make those kids concentrate and take this test. I mean, there's been stories of peppermint candles and having the kids chew peppermint gum, trying to stay awake. There's this whole model that everyone has to work with, but everyone knows it's lacking, and it hurts the teachers, and it's not good for the children either.
Well, again, we all know teachers around here, and I could say here that I spoke to many people in the past where they agree that this isn't the right thing. I've heard that the teachers today spend more time on paperwork and again focusing on teaching to the test than actually just going out there and spending time with the children. I think if you talk to a lot of teachers who've been doing this, it gets very stressful around those times because, and we should probably get into this, is how some school districts are rewarded if they do well and some aren't. And that puts a lot of pressure on teachers to see how well they do on these tests that really don't coincide with what they really are teaching in their classroom. I mean, is that a fair statement?
I think,
we're asking them to do two things that are in opposition of each other. We're asking, we're saying to our teachers, get to know my student. He's so great, or she's so great. She's talented and she's good in this area, and maybe needs some help in that area. We want you, we want you to have that individual attention with our students, right? Yep. We're asking them to engage them and teach to that specific learning style, and we're asking a lot of them, but at the same time we're disenabling them to do exactly what we're asking them to do in the first place. They're bogged down with standardized testing.
And private schools, they're not being made to go along with these tests. So they have all this extra time for free writing and creative writing, journaling, activities, giving speeches. I mean, there's so many things that you could list, group work, that all those kids are getting to do, and they're not restricted this way. And so I don't think that's fair at all.
Right, and again, we were talking about this earlier as well. This ties into money to a certain extent. I mean, this all started with No Child Left Behind, right? And then you're mandated by the state, depending on how well you do, which again, each school district, every school district's on an even playing field, right? I mean, depending if no matter what kind of kids you have and where they come from or what kind of language they speak, they're all on the same level. But if there's a lot of money that goes into producing these tests, that if you didn't have these, that money could go elsewhere. Right.
Well, Pennsylvania right now has a $210 million contract with the Pearson Corporation. That's the corporation that designs the test, distributes the test, scores the test. That's a lot of money over 5 years. And if that money could be taken away from the standardized testing, from just PSSAs, and reallocated so that we would have the benefit of actually creating the programs that have been based on research, have shown to be really beneficial to students, like co-curricular activities and after-school tutoring and peer tutoring programs. those are important programs, and they could be funded.
Yeah. What are you hearing on the state level, Tarah?
I think that's one of the big problems with Harrisburg is that you have all these federal requirements, and it just seems now from the new packet of information that's for every student succeeds, for the new act, the new No Child Left Behind, that's not supposed to be like No Child Left Behind. When you look at that, it seems like we're just gonna go along again and try to go along and get along, when really the states should be pushing back and saying, hey, listen, this is not working. It's not working for our kids. It's not working for our teachers, and we have to have pushback. Yeah. I think the fear is a lot of the really involved parents that have the information, that are trading the information on with technology, some of their kids are more high-performing children. Yeah. So that's the last people that the school district wants opting out, because that's just going to drop our scores lower in the Hazleton area.
Right. Interesting topic. Ladies, we're going to take a quick break. You're watching In Depth. We'll be right back talking about the PSSA scores. Stay right there. Welcome back to In Depth. I'm here with Tarah Toohil and Renee, Baran, and we're talking about parents who are opting their kids out of the PSSA scores. So, in continuing our conversation, I think the public needs to have a better understanding of what these tests are like. I mean, we hear about PSSAs, we hear about SATs. What are they like, and how are they different?
It's a bubble test. It's much like the format of it being like what we would know as the SATs, where you've got your number 2 pencil and you're filling in your bubbles. The problem with that format is that an SAT format such as that is geared for 18-year-olds who can maintain their attention span long enough to get through through the standardized test. Yeah. But we're talking about the same format being applied to 8-year-olds who have obviously much shorter attention spans. The other interesting thing to mention is that the classrooms actually have to be altered for testing times. The teachers are instructed that they've got to cover any motivation, any posters. The walls have to actually be covered so that students can't use any sort of information from posters on the walls to answer any of the questions. Yeah. So it really is a very stark environment. If you walk into a school during PSSA testing times, you'll see it's a bit prison-like. Everything is covered and it's very stark. Again,
high stress.
And very high stress for students, for the teachers, for the administration. It's high stress for for
this
everyone.
Just seems like such a disconnect, and we see this so often where you have people coming in from the state who I think their intentions are very good. They want to show how we're improving, and they want to come in with these new ideas and be able to put some metrics out there. And I think that's all good, but the problem is that there's this disconnect between the real world versus what you put on paper and what sounds good. And I think that's what's happening now is we've had it out here, we've tried it, and again, as we've seen with parents, they've had a couple kids go through the system, and some who years ago didn't have to do it, and now they're doing it, and they're saying, really, how are we improving here?
I agree, and not to get into Keystones, because I know that would be it's
a whole other show.
A whole different show. But the Keystone exams, I think that's what happened. We were trying to make improvements, but we didn't have enough information from the local level, and all of a sudden it was like really high level, high performing children were not going, and they're going to good colleges. They were not going to graduate. So you're like, what did we just do? And we were trying to make it less of a test. Less testing and ease up on the testing restrictions, and so that teachers were not always teaching a test. And we ended up, it completely backfired with that. So right now we have a 2-year delay that we just initiated in the legislature with the Keystone exams, that the graduation requirement they've lifted for 2 years because children were actually not going to graduate.
Right.
So that's an example of it, how this approach isn't working.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've all been through school, and I think it's fair to say that, some kids aren't good test takers. So, some are, and some aren't. And I don't think it shows always a good level as to where your child is. And sometimes unfair is what I'm trying to say. And again, I'm going back to a lot of conversations I've had with school teachers who said this. But school teachers aren't going to come on the show and say, this is wrong. They can't. They're not allowed to talk about it. And their hands are kind of tied with that. And so that's just unfortunately the way that the system is. But getting back to a lot of the parents that are out there, I mean, if people are out here watching and saying, oh, you know what, I'd like to learn more about this, number one, where can they go? And number two, is there anything going on between the parents and the school district? Is there any communication taking place between, and I'm talking Hazleton, but even with other school districts?
I'm pretty well informed, and I am not aware of any communication that happened at a district level where maybe there could have been a forum for discussion where parents could have been invited. That has happened in other districts, where there was just an open discussion. Teachers were there, parents were invited, and it was, a debate forum where there were moderators there who had information from both sides of the issue to answer and to field those questions from parents. I would love to see that happen before PSSAs happen again next academic year.
So we've missed the window. So
We have
right
missed the
now,
window
your
this
kids
year.
are being tested or just are ending the
Yeah,
test.
they'll just finish.
But we need to do that going
Yeah.
forward, definitely. Because parents, this is the way it's always been. Your kids have an enormous amount of testing. So you think, well, I'm not going to opt out my kid if everybody else is doing it. He's going to sit in the library by himself.
Yeah,
Right.
parents are busy. I mean, I'm oddly well informed, but we have a situation where you've got tests that are mandated but not funded.
Yeah.
That's Rick. That's like, if Sam said to you, part of your job is going to be that you're going to drive to Nebraska every year and you're going to stay there for 9 days, but that trip is going to be your expense. It's mandated. We're going to make
Sam
you do
does
it.
that to me all the time.
bet he
I'm
does,
used to
right?
that, so I get it.
We're going to make you do it, but we're not going to pay you for it. It's just going to come out of your salary. That's exactly what we're doing with the school districts. We're saying we're going to test you. You're going to pay for that. It's a crazy. That's a crazy system.
Yeah, no, and I get that. But here's my question. Let's say you along with other parents sat down with Dr. Butler or some other administrators and said, we're really upset with this. We think there needs to be changes. What would they come back with outside of the fact that we're mandated and it comes down to the money we spoke about? Would they come back with in any way saying it works and it's better for our kids? Because right now we're talking here that taking the test, teaching to the test is not good for the kids' education and growth. Is there any data out there that's saying that these tests are improving our kids, or that they are getting better, that they are moving through the system?
No, and in fact, not that I'm aware
No,
of.
I would say no.
But in fact, the results from PSSAs don't actually even come back to the school until the summer. So now you imagine a teacher who has a very busy classroom of let's say 28 kids. Those kids are going to go through PSSA testing. The results are going to be sent back to the Pearson Corporation. They're going to score them, and then by June or July, those results come back to the school. Now, as the teacher, those students have already moved out of my classroom, and I've got 28 new kids that I've got to focus on this year. I'm already becoming overwhelmed with what I'm being asked to do for the upcoming school year. What is the point? It's not benefiting the students at all.
So it's just data collection,
Yeah.
and you can use it to punish a district or reward a district.
It's strictly
So
punitive.
It's really bad. And then if you think of all that time that went into it, that they lost, that they weren't doing special projects or having meet the teacher night, science fair, things that the kids actually care about or want to get involved in. And then you have to give those children, you have to give your students a little bit of a break afterwards. So the week or so after, you're not going to give intense amounts of homework because they're going to have just worked so hard, but they're not going to know the reward of it or if they even did well.
Well, again, times have changed. And if you go back to when we went to school and we had Harmon and Greeby, back then you had different levels of within your class. You had 7-1, 7-2, and 7-3. And kids were on different levels based off of how they measured with other kids. Personally, I think that worked. When I was on the school board, that came up a couple times, and it was a controversial issue because today, parents don't want their kids to be on a level lower than others and be looked at. And I get that and understand that. But in my opinion, I'm speaking on my own, and you can share your opinion. I don't think that all kids are equal. I think that some kids are better in math, some kids are better in science, and that they sometimes if you go too fast with some people, some get lost and some lose out because you're not teaching to those other kids. So I don't know. I mean, that's just basics, and to me, that's just common sense. But again, times have changed, and people don't want that because of, well, the stigma of it.
The last 2 years, they did a mixed model. So they did high, medium, low in every class and spread the children throughout. And that's not really fair either, because if you're a child that deserves to be challenged, you shouldn't have to go to the STEM school to get challenged. You should be able to get challenged right there at Drums Elementary. So I think it is difficult, and I think all of the restrictions that we have on teachers and their ability to just teach and interact with their own students makes it really hard. So I think it's a good point, but parents, I think parents will say, well, my kid's in the low class. Why is my kid in the low class? And I think there's a lot of pushback there that maybe the districts try to avoid.
Yeah, I think it would stigmatize kids to categorize them like that.
Yeah.
That's hard.
I mean, maybe
That's
back
hard.
then you knew 7.1 was
Right.
the best, I
It's just
guess,
ways.
and it went down. But you know who the high achieving kids are in your school as well. Like, you don't want to be labeled the low class, but it would be nice if it was Algebra 1, Algebra 3. Maybe they could do it that way. It would be nicer, that you didn't progress to get to that
Right.
level yet and you need a review. But they're so busy having all these other mandates.
Yeah. So talking about the parents that are opting out, do you think, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of other parents who probably agree with you, but they don't do anything about it. Is that a fair comment? Do you think that
what I'm finding is that people don't know, they don't really see the harm because they don't have the information. And when you start pointing out, boy, wouldn't it be great if your child could go to an after-school activity, if there were funding for your child to go to an after-school activity till you get home from work, or if they offered tutoring, or if for schools that are only can only offer like art on a cart, if you had funding for art and music, and that when you start talking through all of those issues with parents and they become a little bit more aware of how the funding streams and the effect that it has on the system as a whole, you sort of see that light bulb go off, and they start to realize, this is what everyone's complaining about with Common Core or Pennsylvania Core standards, and I see how I play a role in this now. But there really has been so little information shared in our school district that.
Has there anything been done with going higher than the school districts? Again, you're talking other things going on in the states, but the school districts, Dr. Butler, these guys have to do what they have to do. How else we were getting this message out to the legislature?
We have to look at it. So going forward, we need to get this information out now so that it's ready to go to have a forum right when school starts. So teachers are going to be busy gearing up, training the kids to learn in a certain way and take those bubble tests, and they're following the rules and they have to do that. But I think going forward, we have to make sure that we get that information out there, that we do have a group forum, a couple of them, and get as much as we can out there. And then Harrisburg, we have to bring that back to Harrisburg and say, listen, you can say whatever you say in your committee meetings, but this is actually what's going on with our kids, and this is why it's detrimental.
Gotcha. So before we close out, we have about a minute left. For people who are watching this and are interested, where can they go to find out more information on this and to learn more?
You can go to the Facebook opt-out group, and you can join that group. There's lots of great articles and information that's shared there, and you can contact any of the legislators who are on the education committee, and voice your opinion there via email or by phone.
Okay.
Which is important. And you can contact our office. We'll be able to get parents' information both ways. But I think it's something maybe if we have the kids consider it very early on. I don't know what they would do if you opt out early. Then teachers would be able to say, well, I have a group of kids, they're not going to be taking this test, and they're going to be able to do other special projects, SAT prep, whatever it may be. And it would free it up for the teachers, I think, if they would allow you to do it in advance. So we'll have to see if that works.
Well, it's certainly an important topic. And again, as I said earlier, this is something that I think a lot of people have talked about, but no one really has done anything about it. So I've always said that if you really want to get something done, you have to step up and make it happen. So I certainly respect you for really going out there and doing that. And again, I'm sure that a lot of people who watch this are probably more educated on it and said, oh, I did not know about that. And again, I think the key is always just trying to improve the education of our kids and doing what's best. And obviously, we always talk about money and how money is used and how it could be better spent. And it obviously ties into this as well. So we're out of time, but I want to thank both of you for coming here and letting everybody know what's going on, and please keep us informed, and anything we could do to obviously inform the public, we certainly will. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of you for joining us here on In Depth. We will see you next time. Have a great evening.